Hello, good morning. This is Bharat, and we are going to look at what design decisions that you need to take when you're making a website. This is the same day that you do that because it's about the actual doing of it. It's taking me time. If I did it, I would do it very fast. And this is the same for any individual, but let's start with it. So, some things that I've said already, vocabulary in context, and the word I used was jargon. I don't want to spend time talking about language. If you're interested, you can look at meta language. Meta language. Okay, that's in logic. You come across it among other areas. So IP addresses are something I'm sure you're aware of, and I'll not be spending more time on that. But the IP address range is basically the idea of an IP address is that it's an identification on the network, and it's an analog of MAC address. MAC address is the device of the hardware details, and IP address is the network node. There is difference between hardware and network. Network is just a chip on your or board on your device. It can be a very big device. It can be a very tiny computer. It can be on a pen drive, as you are probably aware. And the word for it is network interface card. One networking device is a network interface card. That's what the network node is on your device, which has MAC address as its identity as a whole. That's the idea, but they are analogs for sure. Analogy. That's where I'm talking about. That's where I'm borrowing the term from. The question of duplicates came up soon enough when they were there were so many networks and so many nodes of the network that they increased the range, and it was not possible to assign more numbers, and that's why you use the same numbers over time, for example, and that's what you call dynamic addressing. DHCP is a setting you might have configured in your computer sometime at some point in time you might have come across. If you haven't, it doesn't matter. Just that I'll assign you an IP address for some days and another for another set of days and so on and so forth. Static IP addresses are used by organizations, by people who have physical devices to maintain, and it's like leasing for a long period of time. So it's obviously about investment in terms of not just for the IP address, it's also about what infrastructure you've got. And that's a different level altogether. I would say enterprise and large businesses, things like that. But let's move on to the next one, geolocation specific. So if you're in a country and you're trying to access content which is restricted for certain geolocations, you have these questions of using virtual private networks and bypassing things and using proxies and so on and so forth. And that is where you come across the term geolocation. Geolocation specific IP addresses. That is one area. That is the more popular ones. But when you study these subjects, you have to study these particular types and restrictions on IP addresses and so on. Anyway, so there are classes of IP addresses, classes A through E, and it's a standard computer networking 101 course. 101 is how they put it in the West, and the West would have it everywhere, and it's something you should consider. But introductory courses on computer networks will introduce you to classes of IP addresses, and address range class E is reserved. That's what I read just in the morning today. Okay, so this is not strictly required. But if you want to okay, if you want to restrict access to your website to users from particular locations, ranging from a single IP address, which because of dynamic changes or dynamic IP addressing changes over time. So you'll have to keep track of what IP address you're using. You will have to know some of these things. That is where it comes in handy. You will have to study it anyway, whether you want it or not. Now, domain name is so any domain name, gov.political, right? That is what I wrote last time. You can think of any number of websites. I don't want to go into particular examples. It is a decision that you take. That is the point. And in order to take such a decision, you will have to have things charted out. So don't be in a rush. Don't be in a hurry to buy a domain name, because you make an investment, however tiny or otherwise it may be. Server, these things. So a computer that acts as a resource provider on a network, on a computer network, which these days can be an Internet of Things network. Internet of Things is your Alexa and other commercial products available to you. Ultimately, it comes from laboratories, and in the end, you have in the market names registered which are meant to be made a currency of, and things like that. And non-fungible tokens is something I've been talking about for months now. So Internet of Things, there will be a great deal of examples, and Alexa is just on the top of it, just in the top of the frequency list you've got, actually top of it. That's what I mean. And this is related to search engine optimization and a lot of other things. Deployment end user, there's not much to it than what I've said for our purposes. And then request meta information, requesting information from a resource on a computer network. That's what I've written. That's how I've given its definition. So meta information is information about information. So you have a file. If you have a file on your computer, you have details about this file. You have when it was created, when it was modified, if it was tampered with, if there are certain restrictions, if there are permissions, read, write, execute, and you will need file permissions. This is very much relevant. In fact, you need it as something you do daily on a machine, whether it's one operating system or another. If you're writing a website, you will need to work with file permissions, and you'll need to think of users and groups and things like that on a regular basis. And it's best you keep a journal of these things, because it's very difficult to manage if you're actually looking at multiple servers and things like that. So you have to keep it highly organized. GPUs, it's a metaphor for farms and processors for parallel operations. You should compare this with field programmable gate arrays and application-specific integrated circuits. GPUs are ASICs, application-specific integrated circuits, as far as I believe, because I'll have to look it up again, and I'm not going to do that, because more than this is not required for our purposes. So VLSI design courses on any massive open online course, or massive online open course, whichever it is, go through some of them and see what suits you best, but don't make investments of time and money and other resources that you have, because they're very limited with all of us. In fact, nobody would want to waste time, money, and other resources that we must take care of, right? So unless you're very good at these things, you will have to do a bit of trial and error. So there's something called vendor lock-in. If you know anything from management, you know this. I have had the privilege of having taught for a management exam, and it's an internationally recognized management exam, by the way. And that's one source of this information, vendor lock-in. So there are questions on this exam which talk about vendor lock-in. Compute instance is a virtual machine. This is from Oracle. I'm quoting it from Oracle because I've known Oracle for time immemorial. So Oracle is a pioneer of databases, for example, and it's one of the key players in the market as far as the databases are concerned. You can look up market share and everything if you're interested. It is proprietary software, so you might have not open source, or community edition of Oracle DB. Free to develop, deploy, and distribute edition of the world's leading database. That's how they've touted it. I have little knowledge about this thing, but it is certainly something that you need to look at when you're deciding which database vendor to choose. 23 AI free offers up to these things. AI vector search. Vector search is something you should be interested in. And there's a lot more that goes into these things. So this is for later. But sure, you have Oracle providing a free solution for you to try. Again, this is about how much time and other resources you are investing and what you're doing with this. If this is just an exercise in learning, I wouldn't tell you to keep on trying 10 database vendors, right? That is the idea. Okay, how does this paint? This probably highlights it. Yeah, I don't know what it does, but yes. Okay, this is what I've said. Now, next one. You know a lot of browsers and you can find out more about them. I'm leaving some things as homework. This is important. Secure shell SSH, and you need this if you want to connect to a server, and this is your staple, so you need it every time you connect to a server. There are different ways of connecting to a server. You use your admin panel. cPanel is something I mentioned last time, for example. And there is this other way of connecting through command line interface. Command line interface is just a black and white window. The black and white window can have syntax highlighting, so you can have colored text, you can have highlighting like you see here, yellow, orange, and green, and you may have other text processing, text formatting capabilities. PowerShell is a much better version of command prompt, for example. And you can modify command prompt. If you've used Cygwin, you might have seen those colored text dual symbols and things like that. Coming back to this, Secure Shell is how you connect to the server to make changes to your website. Actual deployment in production grade servers is different from what you see out there in the public internet. Number one. Number two, you will have how these things are actually deployed, but they will probably want you to pay for these bits of information, for this knowledge. On the other hand, you might have solutions like Shakti processor, RISC processor. RISC is an architecture reduced instruction set computer, I guess, and you should explore this. That's what I'd suggest. I mean, if you had the time, you should explore options where explore options for looking at how servers, production servers, are deployed. Again, this is about SMEs, the size of the business, small and medium enterprise, things like that. So I was reading about this, and I came across who uses these IP address ranges. Again, from IP address range I've talked about earlier. So what kind of business it is, that is what dictates what you're going to do with it. Also, you're going to outsource this kind of thing. Outsource. So if you're going to outsource this kind of thing, you are not going to be the person making these decisions. You might be consulted. You might be paying for things that you don't need to pay for, but this is involved. That is what I'm saying. So it is a good idea to actually know something about how production servers are actually deployed and what you need, or what you can have. You can have 10 things, out of which only 2 or 3 are needed. So database querying, I could say that the internet, yeah, knowledge base is what I wanted to say. And knowledge economy is something I've said before elsewhere. So knowledge economy is the entire keyword business. So whether it's search engine optimization, whether it's search engines, it's Google, or the antitrust issues. That antitrust is laws relating to monopolies in the Western world at present. Okay, so key word business, keyword search. Keyword search is to do with SEOs as well as elsewhere. I'm not naming everything I have on my head, but SEO is definitely the obvious answer to this. Number one. Number two, you have knowledge economy. This is all part of this. And see, what's made popular is because of several reasons. One of them being is that pe- if you give people something for less, why would they want to spend more on it? And this is getting into purchasing power and purchasing power and so on. Purchasing power, parity, and other things from economics. I would surely encourage you to look up, but that's for another time. So knowledge base is what you want to look at. That's what I've added here. In addition to what there was last time, OBS Studio, the software I'm using to record this video, it needs configuration. It's like much serious software, and every time you change your machine, you will have to configure this. Every time you have an install, you have to consider this. So you better save your settings. If you don't, it's a waste of your time, of course. These things have stricken out maybe sometime later, not for this series. In fact, yeah. So MDN is a haunt. I've included these things as haunts. I can't see them here because I did not paste them here. Okay, but haunts, the 3 haunts that I would apart from. So last time I said Stack Overflow, and this time I'm giving you MDN as a third haunt, and there will be others, but Stack Overflow, GitHub, and Mozilla Developer Network. There are lots of tutorials, as there are on these websites that provide you these software. So Django has tutorials, and MDN has tutorials, and MDN is about the entire web. So not just Django. For JS, you have for IP, and for HTTP and everything. So MDN is certainly something that you want to visit again and again. JS, I wrote these words. A seriously good programming language you should learn by spending 20 minutes a day. If you don't have time, none of us actually do have time. Compare the code. The trouble is, you think you have time. Now, I'm not going into codes and philosophy and how you can replicate studies and prove or disprove or partially prove or disprove things and things like that. So I've stricken out more things. Now, backend, well, choose Python, the easiest language to learn, I guess. One of the easiest languages to learn. In fact, it's not the case that it's the easiest language to learn, because if you look at Python, you look at C Python, you're basically ignoring the fact that Python depends on C, or Python has to interface with C and other parts of systems that it is installed on, and so forth. So, because it is like English, it feels like it's the easiest language to learn. Again, it's a matter of perception. Front end, JavaScript. JavaScript is a seriously good programming language, as I've declared here, right? So Python, JavaScript will let you learn a lot of things in a short amount of time. You should definitely go for them. The rest of the words we'll discuss some other time, maybe. Stateless protocol is every new HTTP request is a new exchange between the interlocutors. I'll leave the codes for you. Stateless sessions don't help us log in, and I can't basically enter email and password every time, or I can't give you credentials every time I make a request. Therefore, I need to have a stateful session, I'm calling it. This is what the idea of a session is: stateful communication. So previously I gave you my credentials. For so much time I would request you to let me access resources which are based on these credentials. This can be Netflix, this can be any simple resource on the other end, right? So Netflix, you stay logged in on the device, or you stay logged in on all of these devices, and you stay logged in till you close the browser. You stay logged in for so many days, and there can be different configurations, let's call them. So N is where you started, I guess. It was your nth visit. You gave me credentials. I'm the server, and after that, for the conditions, following the conditions that we have, till m, till n plus m, we will have these from n to n plus m, or from n plus 1 to n plus m, we will have exchange information which is based on authentication and authorization. There are two different things. You study these things when you implement logic, not logic, login management, and based on these email and password that you've given me, I'll let you access these things. And this is for communication number n plus 1 to communication number n plus m. Till Sentinel is reached. Sentinel is from Python iter. It is an analog. I'm bringing analogs on purpose so as to show you that it's just a matter of selecting which symbols you want to use to talk about things. You can have symbols ad hoc. You can have symbols temporarily. You don't have to. You can make up your own symbols. You don't have to follow a convention. You need to follow convention when you are trying to get into an environment in which there is, for example, shared documentation. For example, if you want to be on GitHub, you will have to follow the conventions. And last time I talked about doc type HTML, and which prompted me to say that you could write your own programming language. And there are people who've written programming languages, and it's an entirely different thing, as I've said. Login management is what do I want to say? These things I've already said previously. So user records on server side, it's a database or file. It's a database. That's how we do this. Files is it's possible, but it's not efficient. It's not fast enough, and there may be other reasons. How many files will you have? If you have 1,000 strong user base, you will have to have 1,000 files. That requires more space. So constraints of compressing data, right? The databases do it better. That's why they came up in the first place. So user records on the client side, temp folders on your Windows machine from Windows of yore. Who gave me the license to come up with this phrase? No one did. It's my own original coinage. Okay. So this is something that you could talk about when you don't have anything else to talk about in the world. So that is all. The next one, process interpreted interprocess communication threading. We'll look at later. Command line interface, you might have come across Blue Screen, a Death Inspired Anachronistic Power Ranger shell. So this is something I wanted to have as creativity for today for this one, and it's quite creative as you can see. So Blue Screen of Death. Yes. Okay. Blue Screen of Death. BSOD. This kind of thing. So this is what you're looking at when you're talking about command line interface. All you have is this. Okay. And PowerShell. Shell. This is what you're looking at, and you do have syntax highlighting. You can see syntax highlighting here in command. No, it's PowerShell again, and it's a black screen. Generally, PowerShell by default is blue screen. So that is what command line interfaces look like, and this is an example of an allusion. This is an example of a lot of literary figures and things you can do with poetry, things you do in poetry and literature, and I would encourage you to look it up. So Lewis Carroll was a mathematician. Lewis Carroll, right? And had a different name. Lewis Carroll was his pen name. So log is for later, MIME types and file types are for file handling. So just know the use. Just know that you will need MIME types in headers in HTTP requests, both in your framework like Django and Flask, and in your server like Nginx and Apache. Nginx and Apache. Today I want to talk about design decisions, and I've already spent 30 minutes or so talking about things other than design decisions. So yes, of course, I wanted to go through the vocabulary because I mentioned it last time, and then it would be like, okay, you said you would talk about vocabulary, and then you actually didn't talk about vocabulary. So that's why I've gone through the vocabulary first. Much of it, if not all, if not every single one of them. Packet read TCP and IP, and that'll take your time. And if you want to do this in 10 days, if you want to write a website in 10 days, you cannot start by reading about TCP IP or spending hours and hours trying to master the thing, or at least become well familiar with it. So path is just folder location. Relative path is folder location from a given folder location. That is not starting from the start. That is all there is to it. Scope and names is space. I'll leave you to read them. C packet above, latency is for later, totally for comparing networks. Herbert Schilt is the name of the person who wrote Java Complete Reference, and I read it more than a decade ago, and it's still paying off. So things you do well, and they're the only things to do actually, they pay off for eternities. Okay, or eternity. So पढ़ाई ऐसी करो जो मरने के बाद भी याद रहे, नहीं तो न को. So so study so that it is useful even if even after your death useful to you even after your death. That's the fun bit, and that's the witty bit, I suppose. And study like that or don't study. Okay. So class car in Python. This is written in Python. The Python syntax. Okay. This is formatting, and I'm not concerned about that at the moment. So, for example, if I were to actually online Python interpreter, not compiler, to give it to use its proper name. Online Python interpreter. Again, not the entire thing works. Okay, if you wanted to do all sorts of, for example, you wanted to do file handling, it may not support this. Enter first number 23. Enter second number 89. The addition is 112. Great. So import string, just string. Yeah, string. Print string dot ascii. So this is what I did last time, right? This is something I pasted last time. Then, as I was saying, class car. You can inherit. There is something called inheritance, but that's for later. Class car. I will define a dictionary properties. Okay, nice, nice. So class is methods, right? Properties and color blue, make 1970. I'll choose it to be a string. 1979, 1970, it doesn't matter, just random choice I'm making. Manufacturer, facturer. I know that Boeing does not make cars. Okay, then you can have chassis. I don't know, I'll just okay, let's suppose that there's some identification like this associated with the chassis and things like that. Chassis, what I've ordered, the pronunciation is French. It's French. Okay, I cannot spend time on such things. Okay, so show properties. This is probably something that it wants to print. F get self dot foo. Okay, so how this can be used is a good question, because it has functions within functions. So properties dot or dot get manufacturer if set. Okay, so we retrieve the property, retrieve the value and change the value. Then you can have immutable types and things like that. So when you don't want the value changed, so for example, you don't want MAC address of your device changed, right? So let's see what happens when we do this. Car. This is a constructor. Okay, C for car. Let's see if it runs. Yes, it ran without any errors. Let's see if get, see what it prints. Okay, not print, just print as is from C. So yep, there's an error. Now I don't know what happens when I do this. I'll just try. Function has no attribute this. Question is, how will I access this? Okay. Yeah. See, this runs because that is defined. One was given. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah, I'll leave you for the spelling. None. Okay, it returned none. It returned none because there's where the returning is happening. Okay. Yes, exactly. Now, the question I'm facing here is how you execute, how you actually call this fget function. Okay. So what I'll do is to show you this, show you that this actually works. I'll just define this as a method for this class. Now fget belongs to this. So instead of using the same name, property show property manufacturer, right? Manufacturer. And in fact, I just used this because it was there, it came up, right? I did not mean to use this. So well, let it be for the moment. Show property manufacturer. Run. Boeing, which is expected, right? Similarly, you can set the property. You can change the property. Okay. So change property manufacturer and you can change the manufacturer. So that is the idea of a class. Class Mercedes car, I guess. So self dot putties goes to car dot. I don't know how to do this. I'm doing this after a very long time, but print. Yeah. See, it worked. Self isn't working here because self is not allowed here. Self is not defined here. That is to do with scope and whether that variable is available to you. As you can see, Mercedes will have everything that car has. That is the idea of inheritance. Okay. Inheritance. So I don't have to define everything for Mercedes that is defined for car. Then you can have a particular model of Mercedes, and this model can inherit Mercedes in turn. So Mercedes, this property and cars properties will be transferred to this, and there are restrictions. You can choose which properties to transfer and so on. Okay, so this is a bit of hands-on. Okay, and this is I did not even plan this. Otherwise, I would have done this better. So Herbert Schild, Java Complete Reference is the book. If you have time, go through it. So show image. This is what I had for you. Show image is a method on this class in this class that retrieves the relevant image, the target image from the database and gives it to the returning to the calling function. So I will use some function in which I'll call this function, right? That is the idea. So to the calling program, let's call it function program, whatever it is. MySQL connector or connection, so it is just pseudocode. I have written all of this here because I wanted to give you the word, just to give you a word. Doing so many things to give you a word. BPE pseudocode. Okay, pseudocode. Pseudocode is what you want to think in terms of it does not matter. It's your program. You can write whatever you want, right? As long as it makes sense to the machine, it'll work. By that I mean, if you're trying to make a logical mistake, so something is true and not true at the same time, that won't work. That is a fundamental example. It's a trivial example. Okay, so connect to the database, make a connection, connect to the table. In fact, connect to the database server and then connect to the database and then retrieve values from the table that you want. That is what these things do. You will have an iterator. Iterator is in Python, and we'll look at it later. You can look at it today if you wanted, but you change an iterator. Iterator can be used only once. That is the restraint on it. That's a constant on it. That's why you have to get it as a list. That's what this statement on 86 does. Return the image, or if it's not found, return none. So that's for error handling. That's for exception handling. That is what you need. And if you don't implement those things, you have all sorts of breaking, and you don't want that. That's why I've written this instead of writing return QS. What if the list didn't get created for some reason, or what if there was no element in the list? That's why get item list or none. And this is in fact imitating something from Django, so that you know what you're looking at when you actually first come across it. So get the resource, or say 404. 404 is not found, resource not found. So don't raise an error, don't raise an exception, that kind of thing. This is very much a part of actually writing your web pages and actually writing your functionality to show those web pages and other resources that you will be showing using your server, Nginx or Apache. Pseudocode. That is the takeaway. Pseudocode. That is the takeaway. Yeah. Don't mind the formatting, please. Instantiate instance. I'll leave it for later. Okay. Today I wanted to discuss this Alice in Wonderland. I used this example. I constructed this example. I should be given all the credit for constructing such a brilliant example, but yeah, that's different. I made this example then and there, and the idea is that you're looking at noun phrases, and first of all, whether they are correct noun phrases, and whether you can have I'm Alice in Wonderland, therefore I must say Alice is in Wonderland can exist together. Things like that. So this is something that should be detected by your natural language processing system. So is it possible to have in, for example, I am Alice from Wonderland, that is what you'd say. But if you have someone's name as Alice in Wonderland, it's perfectly fine. So this was done on purpose. I mean, it was not childish, or it was not simply the desire of having fun, things like that. Okay, that's all for now. But this is how you test these systems. Among other things, that's how you test your natural language processing system, whether it's spacey or some artificial intelligence stuff. So artificial intelligence stuff is just spacey getting better, kind of. Okay. Now, next we are going to look at. It was supposed to be here. It's not here. So next we are looking at sample checklist. A sample checklist. Okay. Yeah, please bear with me for the typing. Okay. So I'll go through this fast, and this is just an example. It's not something serious. It's not something serious enough for you to copy it as it is. But if you wanted those things, you have them on GitHub anyway. You could just go to GitHub, git clone, and run the thing. And finally, just deploy it on your server by copying files. So ultimately, it comes down to writing your server, configuring your server. So the 3 steps. Step 1, write static. Step 2, write dynamic. Step 3, write server. Can be changed to step 1, change static from git clone on your local machine. Step 2, change dynamic from git clone. Git clone is a command. I'm using it not the best way, but yeah, dynamic. So change Python files. It is a lot of work to do. This in itself, these steps in itself, in themselves, they're big projects in themselves, because if you have a big project, if you want to have let's say functionality and content that suits a sizable business, you will have to have do a lot of work in bringing about these changes in steps 1 and 2. It's just that you will have a lot of skeleton available for you. You just need to make changes to the stuffing, let's call it. Right, server is the main thing that remains. Okay, so git clone, I'll just show you what git clone is. Git clone, cloning a repository. And when you create a repository on GitHub, it exists as a remote repository. You can clone your repository to create a local copy on your computer and sync between the 2 locations. So the idea is that you have public repositories available. You have people posting all sorts of projects they come up with for building a profile, portfolio, and advertising themselves, and having records and making their life easy. That's one of the main reasons actually for using GitHub. GitHub is a version control system. So you work on a project and it develops, and you will have to have different versions, and that is why you need a version control system. So there are files that change, and there are files that don't change. You don't want to keep track of files that change, and this is all what GitHub manages for you. That is the idea. Cloning a repository, you just run this command, clone this repository, and it'll copy the code on your computer. So this is the format of the command. As you can see, git clone this repository, and then run the project on your own computer. That's all there is to it. Once you make enough changes in steps 1 and 2, change the static, change the dynamic, you're good to go. You can just copy the files to your server, given that it is ready to serve your content, static, dynamic, and everything else that you need it to serve. It's configured for those things, those functionalities that you want in your website. It is up there and running. That is all there is to it. Checklist, sample checklist. Questions. What is global interpreter log? That's in C Python, so I'll leave it for later. Okay. Code block. What's a code block? Instructions grouped together, generally related, so that they serve a transition from one block to another in a sequence or an array that is a parallel sequence of blocks in case of multiprocessing, multi-threading, which we'll see later. Multiprocessing and multi-threading are highly technical things. If you do the math, if you don't do the math, you can set everything as a narrative or a story, and that makes easier to learn and remember, and all those things about learning that I don't want to get into at the moment. This is a prerequisite. Let's look at that. Working knowledge of Python, looping constructs. That's something that's universal with any programming language. That's what you do. And then there is something called paradigm programming. Paradigm. There is procedural programming. There is functional programming. There is event-driven programming. There is object-oriented programming and things like that. Yeah, there's nothing that I want to blur out here. Okay, so yes, actually there are things I need to blur out here. Okay, fine. So programming paradigm. Fundamental style of computer programming, offering a way to structure and develop programs. Imperative, declarative, procedural, object-oriented, functional, and logical. So many things. Okay. Structure, you can look it up, but that is the idea. Where does event-driven programming, data-driven programming, so many things, right? Where is that located, right? Event-driven program. This is a comprehensive chart, I guess. Yeah, you can have a look. Overview of the various programming paradigms according to Roy, whoever that is. Again, I should say that this is just a person coming up with a diagram, probably, or a set of books, maybe, that is subject to change in a given period of time. I mean, you could come up with your own diagrams. You will have to come up with your own symbols and secrets to be able to run a website. I've said this before, right? So, looping constructs for loop. So for the numbers 1 through 10, print them. That is the idea. While I don't have this resource available, wait. That is the idea. So AJAX requests, that's what you're looking at. Fetch API, that's what you're looking at. Async await, that is the application of a while loop, as distinct from a for loop, for example. Okay, and you can do the same things using either of the loops. It's just that the implementation will change. Match is a feature they avoided in Python for so much time, and then they eventually brought it in. It's the equivalent of switch case in C and switch case in JavaScript. I think switch case. The thing is, you have the question of choices. So if you have this choice, do this. If you have that choice, do this. If you have a third choice, do something else, and so on. You can have as many as you want. Iterator will look at this if I make a video on that, or you can look it up for yourself. It's easy enough. From functools, import partial, open MyDB, mydata.db, read bytes. RB is read bytes, so read as bytes, not as characters. So I was showing you hex editor last time. That is the difference. When you're reading bytes, you're processing a different set of symbols than when you're reading A, B, C, D, things like that. When you're reading it in an encoded version. For example, when you're reading bytes, you're treating control characters and printable characters as the same thing, for example. As the same thing in the sense that you are not going to print a blank or a white space as a white space. You're going to print it as and BSP in terms of HTML or 0x something, which is what I showed you last time. You are going to print it as an octet in an IP address, for example, not as 192. So that is the idea. I'm speaking in terms that may not be very clear, but I want this to be an overview rather than an explanation of everything that I say, or talking in oversimplified words. I don't want to do that. So for block in iter partial f dot read, 64 is the size of the block, and there's a byte string which is null, has nothing in it, that is passed. So you can see that there is a function that is passed. F dot read is a function. Read is a method on f, which is a file pointer, and this is passed to the function partial, which is imported from functools, that is available in Python as you install it. You are reading bytes in blocks of 64. This is the kind of thing you do when you are doing low-level programming. You're maybe working with one of the cores of your CPU, or you're working with a GPU. You're paging. Paging is memory. You're arranging things in RAM. You're working with encoding the file byte by byte, or you're working with backing it up. You're writing a backup service, things like that, situations and scenarios, environments like that. So low-level programming. This is an example from the official documentation. That is why you have so many things mushrooming up and constantly adding to the redundancy, where they make it simpler for you to understand. So I'm not saying I'm doing a noble thing and telling you these things. This is just something I want myself as well as you to be aware of. So this is how you study these things. Unless you would rather love comfort. Process block is just an indicative name that tells you that you can do whatever you like with this block that you've just read. Okay, so process block can be, for example, paging your RAM. Again, to give you proof that I don't see things out of the blue. Paging in context of RAM is this memory paging. There is something called paging. That's from more than a decade ago. Again, okay. And look at these things. Passing a function, first class function in JavaScript is an analog. Again, analog. So you're learning in parallel. You're looking at JavaScript, you're looking at Python, you're looking at low-level programming, you're looking at higher order functions, you're looking at so many things in parallel. That is how it is. It's just that at one time we can do one thing, and we don't want to be thinking in parallel and things like that. And thinking in parallel is easier said than done, by the way. So let's move on to the next one. Iterator, iterable next. These are things that you need to know if you want to write programs in Python to an extent that is required. You can't do without these things. These are essential prerequisites. Okay. Control flow, if, elif, else. If this is true, do this. Elif, this something else is true, do this. If this other third thing is true, do this. Else, if all else doesn't work, do this. Okay, try except. Finally, try except blocks are present everywhere in production systems. Even they're not recommended, but they're easier. So instead of properly handling exceptions, people simply use try except blocks. And this is from Stack Overflow, to give credit where it's due. Okay, this is from one of the Stack Overflow pages that I'm speaking. Built-ins, enumerate and zip are two examples, and there are a lot of built-in functions that built-in things that you need to know. Enumerate and zip are just two examples. Requests is a library that you must learn if you are working with networking, and if you're writing a website, you're definitely working with networking. Dir is something that you cannot do without. So anything in Python, you just use the function dir to see what it does, what it is. So I'll just show this to you. So for example, dir Mercedes Let's see what happens. Nothing happened because I did not print it. You can do so many things with Mercedes. I'd like to see what you can do with string, which I've imported. You can do all of these things with string. Try them, okay? Try some of them at least. So you need this on a daily basis, like help. You have help with every software package, every software utility, every software program that you use. So you need that, okay? REPR and string, these built-in methods, functions, these built-in functions are needed, like dir is needed. So these things are essentially cannot do without them. That's why I've listed them here. Type with open pointers. What are pointer file pointers? I've already showed you an example. File pointers is pointing to the memory location in the RAM where your function or data is stored. You will need this when you use ARGS and keyword arguments and keyword arguments. Okay, args and wargs, AWERGS. More on this later, but you do this. You pass on a dictionary, pointer, things like that. Okay, that's what you do. You can look it up. I'm just going through this checklist, and it's a kind of list to get you started today if you want to. Okay, AST abstract syntax tree, and literal eval is recommended over eval because eval is not secure, and you need to take care of security. You need to take it seriously. Okay, pickle is not secure either. This is from the official documentation. I've pasted directly. Warning. Okay, so eval, AST eval, literal eval, and basically I type in code as I can show this to you. Import AST. I'll just comment this out. Enter a dictionary. Dictionary here means Python dictionary. Okay. Let's see what happens. So my method is get HTTP request, right? And my status is, or response is, whatever the word for this is, success. So a request was made and it succeeded. Yeah, this is what the code got executed. So I gave you a dictionary, it gave me a dictionary as the result of the print statement or print function. If I entered a function definition, function, x may not be defined, so I will need to define it. X equals to 10, return none. It will not execute because I have not called it. It is supposed to be in different lines, or function definition may not work with Yeah, it depends on how this thing works. But and yes, x is not defined. Yes, x is not defined. Yes, yes, yes. But the point is that if you type a function here, you will see a function executed. So I'll make it simpler. Let's see. F for function, x has a default value. Default value x changes to my change print x, return none. Let's see if it works. No. Yeah, it's something to do with whether you can use functions with literal eval and things like that. Yeah, it's you're not allowed to do that here. So let's run it again. Let's check what happens. Okay, sorry. So def f for function x equals to default value, and it won't let me go to the next line, so you'll have to check how you can go to the next lines, and there is work to be done. But what I'm trying to show you can be shown using variable assignment as well. Yak. So yak is fighter. It did not work. Right. So it depends on how this entire thing works. This is supposed to work. But if you do this with eval input, enter an assignment. If I put it in a try except block, yeah, that's because this did not work. See, this is how the code editor is working, and we cannot control this. So maybe some other time I'll show you this thing working. But instead, let's try if eval evaluates one last time, and then x equals to 0 should evaluate this. Yeah, it's not supporting assignments. What you could do is variable assignment in eval and ast literal eval. Yeah, it doesn't let you assign, and this might be true for eval as well. Yeah, so this is about how this works, and we'll look at it later maybe, or you can look at it later. You can look at it yourself. It's not just search for examples. So ast literal eval examples, and you'll need this. So if you have a string you want to be used as a dictionary, that's what you want. That's where REPR comes in also. Okay, it's from the standard documentation, the official documentation. I'm saying this as well. So Python's eval and literal eval abstract syntax trees, and there's so many things. I mean, there must be so many pages, right? 10 and more than 10 pages. And so this much is something that you need to be able to write dynamic content in Python for your website. So data structures, dictionaries, lists, sets, order sets, these are things that you come across when you need that structure, functionality, and ordered sets, custom implementation. So when you convert a list to a set, the order is changed, and that's not what you want. And for this, you'll find code in Stack Overflow, and just use that code if you don't have time. That's what you do. That's a decision that you take. Okay. Classes, objects. I've already given you an example. Datetime. That is one of the fundamental things that you need when you're working on a project in programming. This is true for C, this is true for Python, this is true for every scenario that you look at. Data serialization is one thing that you need to study. I've already mentioned JSON and XML in my previous video. Prerequisite, what is Python? It's a general purpose programming language. It's a language which you can use to write websites. That's all we care about at the moment. What are dependencies? So you are installing something, and for this installation, you need other things installed on your system. For libraries are code that is optimized for regular use, and that is stored for you to use out of the box. You don't have to think about what's going inside. So these are black boxes, white boxes, glass boxes that you want to use the way you want to use them in your block diagram. So building blocks of these blocks that you're going to create as your website. Okay. Decision, yeah, so some of the decisions that you have to take, which libraries you want to use. So that will depend on what you want on the browser, what you want running on the browser. So for example, there is Danfo, FS, JS. Okay, so data science on your client side. You can have pandas on your backend, so you don't necessarily need to have Danfo. But if you need that, you have it, and you can use it in your vanilla JavaScript style. You don't have to use, don't have to go for TypeScript, or you don't have to use any other language or style of programming on the front end. You can use vanilla JavaScript syntax and style of writing code. So you will want HTML manipulation. You will want elementary. Elementary is Python. So again, backend. Again, I'm flipping between backend and front end. Right? Elementary, XML parsing, HTML parsing. You will need logging functionality. For this, you can have Django login, and if you want more maybe, or if you don't want to get into Django logging, you can go for Celery and other solutions available. Database, you'll have to make decisions. Again, you will need Postgres or MySQL or Oracle, something like that. You will have automation, so whether the page renders as expected, and there can be comprehensive automated tests. For this, you use Selenium, and for things like web scraping, you use Selenium. Okay. Selenium doesn't generally work because if I have a website, I don't want used in ways that I have not designed it to be used. I will put in place some restrictions, and for this you will need to use things like proxies, and proxies can be free and paid, and that is yet another decision that you make. Undetected Chrome driver is based on Selenium, so ultimately it comes down to Selenium. Formatting, this is something basic, so let's skip it. SVG files, I've already said that you can make diagrams using NetworkX and GraphViz, and you can export them as SVG files. That's what you would do. You would export them as SVG files because you want to scale them from a small screen to a projector. That is the use of SVG files. Data processing, data handling, data transport. So you want Excel files to be rendered on your not actually Excel files rendered. So tables from Excel files, Excel sheets as tables in HTML. That's much better than actually rendering Excel files on your browser, because rendering Excel files on your browser means writing something like Google Docs. The thing is, it involves CORS, so that's why we are not going into that. It's a big decision to make because it's a big investment of time. Okay, so there is CORS and there are security implications. Security. Okay, so you're adding more and more to your plate. You don't want that. You already have a lot on your plate. That's why it's better to have Excel files displayed as tables on your static HTML instead of using your Python scripts, right? Instead of trying to render PDFs or other file types as they work in these traditional programs like Acrobat Reader and things like that, Microsoft Excel and LibreOffice and whatever else it is, or Google Docs these days, or whatever else, yeah, Microsoft 365. Login systems, this is something that you need to invest your time and maybe money in. OAuth is much more complex, so this is kind of drain of your time. You don't want to use this. Go for these things instead. These are good enough. Okay, especially when you're trying to write a website in 10 days. OAuth will be a big waste of your time if you want to do this in 10 days. NLP capabilities is just one of the possibilities. Data wrangling, one of the needs, not possibilities. You will have to. This is the more general idea is data transport, as I've already said, formatting and data transport. Code processor, it's just a possibility. Okay, code processor is this thing that we've looked at today. And again, depends on what you want out of it. So on the Spacey website, you have Spacey code running, right? So what do you want out of your website? That's what the question is, and that's what will make you decide. Once you've chosen these libraries, you need to see which Python version supports your libraries, or which Python version or versions are required. Unless you make this decision, you will not be able to deploy your application to the server, because you'll have to install Python first of all. And to install Python, you'll have to install things that let you install Python. So GCC is one of them. Python depends on C. Okay, and Python development tools is another. So you will have to install these things in order to be able to install Python on your machine, and then run Python and use Python to install other things. For example, Spacey. Okay, so GCC, C development, C++ development, these are needed for Spacey and everything else that is built on top of these things. So Python in itself is not enough. First of all, you need C compilation tools. Okay, C and C++ compilation tools. So make sure that you do not skip these things. If you skip these things, you will be wasting your time. Installing two versions of Python, that is added work. Depends on what you want out of the project, depends on what libraries you're looking at, depends on whether this is absolutely needed. If it's not needed, don't go for it, especially when you are just trying out something new. Make it incremental, make it modular, keep the module size small. Okay, incremental can mean writing hello world and then writing hello world again. So I don't want to use the adjective incremental here, but yes, make it modular. Make sure you work on the size of the modules, the granularity. That's what the word is. Virtual environments. VNV comes installed by default. You don't need this, and virtual environment is something that you will have to install. Okay, if it doesn't come by default, you can install it, but I think you have VNV installed alongside Python or not. Do I need to install Python VNV? Yeah, it comes installed with 3.3 or higher. AI overview is good for information retrieval that you know can be retrieved with trust. So in a trustworthy fashion, right? If you try to retrieve information cannot that AI cannot be trusted for, so I mean, I shortcutted this. I will criticize myself for this, but it depends on whether you want to use AI and things like that. So finally, decision operating system, which Linux flavor you want to use. So Ubuntu, Debian are the choices, and there are very different systems. You have RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and lots of things, but they work differently, and you need to know how they work. And again, there'll be a set of things that you need to know, and a set of absolute essentials that you cannot do without. Like analogous is kernel. So essential things like the ones I've discussed here for Python today, right? You need to know the idea of class, you need to know the idea of object, you need to know the idea of inheritance. That's all. You don't need any more than that. So the bare essentials, the bare minimum is what you want about Linux systems, how they work. So file permissions and file system, and which directories you're going to be using frequently enough, and which core commands, which core functionalities you'll need, things like that. That's all. Kali is not for playing around with. This is related to Shodan. Okay, this is related to penetration testing. We are not discussing penetration testing. We are not discussing security. We will not have time. You will not have time in 10 days, and it is much more serious than it looks on the surface. So that's it for this one. This is some knowledge and design decisions for you. Thank you for your time. See you next time.